What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake and Kyle coming at you today with a little bit of a recap, Kyle, because now the 2020 season is officially done. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are Super Bowl champions. The season 100% over. But we talk about a lot of people on a yearly basis. So we've figured, hey, why not? We're always transparent anyway. Let's talk about some of our best and worst misses for fantasy football in 2020. What do you say?
Yeah, we did this last year at the end of the season. People absolutely loved it. They like us to kind of go back and talk about where we were right and where we were wrong. And we are confident enough in ourselves that we can talk about our misses and be just fine with it. This is no you-know-what measuring contest around here.
We already know who's got the biggest ones. Anyway, moving forward. That's for a different channel, different show. I probably shouldn't have said that, but that's okay. We're going to continue because, like you said, we're not trying to act like we're perfect. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is an expert. We're trying to, be transparent here to let you guys know. You get our thought process. You see these videos all throughout the year, and then we hold ourselves accountable. That's how it is. So this is what we're going to do, Kyle. I have a list of players, of which you already know who they are. Best and worst calls of 2020. We're going to go by position, starting at quarterback and working our way down the list. And we're going to start with the best. Why? Because nobody wants to hear about the worst calls. So let's start with the best ones first for the quarterback position. And we're going to talk about Kyler Murray. Now, Kyler Murray was somebody, we preach, late round quarterback, right? But we're like, if you have to get a quarterback early, no earlier than Kyler Murray, right around the 5th round. And that really paid off for a lot of people. He finished as the quarterback 3 overall this year.
Yeah, another not really late round quarterback strategy, but another kind of wait on quarterback strategy that worked out really well because, yes, especially the first half of the season prior to the shoulder injury, you were getting tons of running upside and throwing upside from him. Kind of slowed down to the second half of the year after that shoulder injury, but he'll be back rare and ready to go for next season. So no worries moving forward.
And it's about fantasy points, right? He's not out there going to throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. It's not what he is, but he is going to go out there and get you a lot of rushing stats, which is really going to help you up. 819 rushing yards and 11 rushing touchdowns. Yeah, I will take that, but I have a feeling he's going to be a little bit more expensive in 2021. Next one up here for us, it's going to be Lamar Jackson. Now, why are we saying our best calls and it was Lamar Jackson? It's because we told people not to draft him.
I can already hear the people typing in the video. What do you mean it was a great call? He didn't do that.
He barely finished inside the top 10. He did get a lot better late in the season. When he really started to rush the ball a little bit more, he looked a lot better, really helped fantasy-wise. But to start the season, we knew the passing totals weren't going to be there, so he'd be reliant on the legs, and he wasn't really using his legs early. Lamar Jackson went in like the 2nd or 3rd round of drafts, and you severely overpaid if you drafted Lamar Jackson.
Oh, yeah. I feel like I say it all the time. We're not drafting quarterbacks in the 1st or 2nd round. And whenever I heard anybody say, I took Lamar in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, I was like, wrong idea. Yeah. Not a good idea. Don't do it. It just ended up hurting a lot of people this year, especially in a year where we had guys missing weeks, injuries, a lot of running back injuries this year at the beginning of the season. You really needed to spend some top picks to reinforce that part of your lineup, and spending that early on a quarterback that gave you barely half of a season worth of top QB1 work wasn't a great pick.
No, and we'll have the same message in 2021. We're not going to all of a sudden change things here. We're going to wait. 5th round is extreme earliest, and the likes of Kyler Murray's and stuff probably won't be there. They're going to be going earlier because people want to jump on quarterbacks early. So those were 2 of our best calls for quarterback. Now, obviously, we talk about almost every player on every team every offseason. So we could have a 6-hour-long show here going through them all, but we're just hitting the highlights. So let's head over to our worst quarterback calls, and these ones always hurt, right? Because we want to be 100%, but we know it's not going to happen. The first one we're going to talk about, it's going to be Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans. Now, coming into the season, we were pretty skeptical that he could really repeat that efficiency that we saw in 2019 because the big plays were there. He wasn't making the mistakes, and we're like, maybe going to be a little different in 2020. And honestly, it really wasn't. And Ryan Tannehill was great once again.
Keyword you use there, efficiency. And for me, it was that deep passing efficiency. That is where him and AJ Brown, the connection that they had was just absolutely incredible in 2019. One thing that really helped that I wasn't anticipating was a huge Corey Davis breakout. That absolutely helped. Having Derrick Henry rush for 2,000 yards absolutely helped, and we love Derrick Henry around here. So nothing against Henry. We obviously were telling people he was a must-have for me, but that really continued to help that deep passing efficiency, and that's what kind of carried over from next season. Good for them, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And now going forward, Ryan Tannehill is going to be one of those names that we're going to start looking at in those mid rounds that maybe we like a little bit more here going forward. The second one, this one severely hurts. It's Aaron Rodgers.
This one was in the draft guide too.
What had happened was he had his best year since 2016, right? I mean, the guy came out and played amazing, and we started it off, early in the season. We're like, dude, this guy is just coming out and he's just on another level. He's on the State Farm Suck It Tour or whatever, discount double check Sucking It Tour, because he was just putting it to people. I mean, the guy had 4,299 yards passing, 48 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions, most of which came in one game against Tampa Bay. The guy absolutely killed it, played the best football he's played in years. Hopefully you got him a little bit later, because I know he was for what he put up, he was a huge discount on draft day.
Yeah, he was. And the main concern about Aaron Rodgers was that they didn't get him any more weapons in the offseason, whether it be in the draft or free agency. And coming off of his 2019 season, where over 50% of his points, I think it was actually closer to like 60 or 70% of his points scored, were basically in like 3 games. It was just really tough for me to say, oh, yeah, this is a team that is going to take a step back from running the football and throw it more than they did last year. But dude came out and just absolutely lit it on fire. Deserved the MVP award. I would have voted for Josh Allen. Who would have ever thought I would have said that? But still, great season nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. He played great. All right, let's head over to the running back position now. Obviously, we talk a lot of running backs, right? It's one of the most popular positions in all things fantasy football, so there's a few more names to talk about here. Some of our best calls, though. First one, we're going to go with Josh Jacobs. We talked up Josh Jacobs a lot after the combine. We sat, within feet of Mike Mayock, and he was talking about, hey, we want to get him more involved in the passing game, and they did. I mean, he saw 18 more targets than he saw the year before. Now, is 18 blowing the doors off of things? No, really not. I wish we could have seen a little bit more, but he still finished as running back 8 overall. Had a solid year. He was a running back 2 for very, most people. A lot of people probably got him like early second, late second, maybe even some of you guys, depending on your league sizes, early third. And it was a great running back 2 for majority of the season.
Yeah, I think the main concern about Josh Jacobs is, performances were a little up and down. What really seemed like was happening, he was getting pulled off the field in some crucial moments or, later in games and things like that. It was just like, man, leave the guy out there is what it felt like. But the dude still had 273 rushing attempts, which he built on that from 2019. He did have over 1,000 yards, scored 12 touchdowns, almost double his total on the ground from the year before. So even though there was a lot of concerns about Josh Jacobs throughout the year, when you look back at the total numbers, it was actually a really, really good year.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it too and say we still haven't seen the ceiling. Plus, don't forget, he pissed a lot of fantasy football fans off late in the season. I mean, he stopped short of the goal line. I mean, he just made some very questionable calls late in the season that would have been more fantasy points, but hey, still finishing inside the top 10. Kenyon Drake is next on the list, and why is he a good call? Well, so many people hated Kenyon Drake, and trust me, I get it. He was not, winning your matchups for you. What he was just consistent, right? He was going to go out there, he was going to get you 10 plus points a week, but was he going to get you 20? No, probably not. He's probably going to hover right in that 10 to 12 range, and that's what he did. A lot of people like Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds got a chance, didn't do a whole lot, but he had over 1,000 total yards and 10 total touchdowns. For a running back 2, it's not horrible. I mean, he finished just outside the top 12 overall. I mean, Kenyon Drake had a solid year. He just didn't absolutely kill it.
Yeah, and really it's kind of the first part of the season that kind of was like, what do we have going on here? Because through the first 5 weeks, he only had 2 touchdowns, and he hadn't had a 100-yard game yet. Then he comes out against Dallas in week 6, scores twice on the ground, runs for 164 yards. And then after that is when, okay, we're getting some more 100-yard games. We're getting some more touchdowns. So, yeah, I think a lot of people, they looked at kind of the first half of the season. And they were like, oh, you're killing me. But they don't look at the entire season. Again, kind of like Josh Jacobs. They're just pinpointing a couple of things. And when you look at the overall stats, and we'll dig deeper into some of the underlying stats more than the offseason, he had a good season, and he probably helped a lot of fantasy owners later in the year.
Yep, and we talked about it coming into the year, right? No offseason, no preseason games, no training camps. Players were going to start slower. A lot of them did. He's just another one of those guys that falls into that category. Next player up, you know about that Chubb life.
Chubb life, baby.
Nick Chubb, once again, continues to be a must-have for us on any given calendar year. If he's in your fantasy football lineup, you're happy, because the offense is basically built around him in Cleveland. He should be good to go for quite a while. The guy missed 4 games, still finished inside the top 10 overall running backs, and had a career high with 12 touchdowns. I mean, we know the volume's going to be there. Kareem Hunt, who cares? He's still going to get the touches as Nick Chubb, and I don't see anything changing here in 2021.
No, he's a top 3 running back for me next year, because I'm going to take the safety of him. I know what I'm going to get from Nick Chubb. Top 4 running back next year. I think I have him at RB4 right now. The dude missed 4 games, still ran for over 1,000 yards, still ran for 12 touchdowns. He has yards per attempt over 5 since he entered the league 3 years ago. And if I hear anybody make the excuse that they don't want to draft Nick Chubb this year because of Kareem Hunt, I'm going to tell you to GTFO. Sometimes you just got to ignore those things and say, I'm going with the talent.
Make sure you put the H on the end of it, though, so it's GTFOH to get him out of here.
Yes.
Otherwise, okay. Just to close the door on it. Make sure there's no
slam it.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. All right. This one is going to be fun. Why? Because I want to tell all the haters to suck it with CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I received death threats over this call in the offseason after week 1. I made a video which said, do not draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire. After that video came out, Damian Williams, opted out. Other things happened, but then we still came out and said, do not draft him in the first round of your fantasy football drafts. If you want to gamble as a running back 2, okay. As a running back 1, do not do it. He came out, balled out week 1, and we got probably the most hate that we have ever gotten on any one player at one, specific time. And then what happened after that? Well, they signed Le'Veon Bell. Okay, that's a great excuse, a great argument, but if they were so sold on CEH, why did they sign Le'Veon Bell? Towards the second half of the season, Kansas City wasn't giving anyone touches in that backfield, not just CEH. He was banged up, sure. He's an electric talent. I love CEH. I love the future of CEH, but we weren't buying it in 2020. A lot of people spent a first-round pick, and you got screwed in your fantasy football lineups for it.
Yeah, and like you said, we'll be willing to buy in later years, maybe even including this year, because his ADP is going to drop dramatically. People are not going to spend the same pick on him this year. That excitement is kind of worn off. He'll end up being a good NFL running back, but there were some concerns, mostly within, at the goal line. He just couldn't score at the goal line this past year, and they kept giving him opportunities and opportunities. He is just not that kind of a back. He is going to be really good in open space. Really excited to see some things from him. It just didn't happen this year. And like you said, we told people over and over, this is going to be a trap. Be very careful. After week 1, we were kind of like, oh crap.
Oh boy.
Hopefully.
I thought I was going to have to
settles
move
down a little bit, and it happened.
I thought I was going to have to go into hiding somewhere. Yeah. I was like, I'm just going to quit, I guess, because this is horrible. No, it turned out pretty good, so we'll take it. What about the next guy up is Chris Carson. Also had Chris Carson as a do not draft option in 2020, so that's why he's one of the better calls, and it was never a talent issue or an opportunity issue with Chris Carson from the outset. It was an injury issue. We just weren't concerned. We weren't sold that he was going to be able to make it all 16 games. He did miss 4 games. His lowest touches in the last 3 years. It's just something that we could kind of see the writing on the wall and didn't want to risk it for where you had to draft him last season.
Yeah, and that's always, kind of been the thing. Like you've said on many, many videos, he must have some pictures of Pete Carroll somewhere because he continues to get the touches. And, this year when he played, he was still getting, a majority of the touches. They were using him. but he was getting hurt, didn't even get to 200, didn't get to 700 yards this year, was banged up even if he was in games. So that was the biggest thing about him, is could he stay out there? So, and we'll see if he ends up moving on from Seattle or not, and what happens in that backfield moving forward.
Yep. Next up is going to be James Robinson. Also, we're going to touch on James Robinson because the YouTube community didn't get this information, Kyle, because this information was put on Patreon early. I'm talking like June. It was put into Patreon that, hey, James Robinson is a name to remember on draft day. And if you're looking to take a gamble, take a risk, and not have to make a huge payment for it, James Robinson was the guy to go grab in Jacksonville. And boy, did that turn out. He basically went undrafted in some leagues and finished inside the top 10. I mean, that could be a league winner for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm going to put my stamp on, this is K-Rich's call of the year. I mean, like you said, I wrote about it in June on Patreon. I put an article out there talking about some UDFAs, and he was at the top of that list. And hey, if Leonard Fournette ends up getting cut, traded, whatever it may be, this is the guy. Keep an eye on him. Do not let this guy fall through the cracks. And everybody was rushing to get him week 1 or week 2. So for those of you that were on Patreon and was getting exclusive access to that content, you had him well in advance of all that, and you rode him to fantasy stardom in 2020.
Yep, helped a lot of people who lost the Saquon Barkleys and the Christian McCaffreys. I mean, this is who you got to fill him in for. Perfect. All right.
The best ones have been, I drafted CEH, but it's okay because I picked up James Robinson to cover it.
There you go. I like that. All right. On to the bad part. The worst calls at the running back position. The first one really hurts. Why? Because it's Dalvin Cook. We were not on board with Dalvin Cook, and it was never a talent issue with Dalvin Cook. Mm-hmm. It was more of a, hey, he saw a lot of volume the year before. What kind of volume are we going to see here this year? Do they have to rest him a little bit more? Is he more going to, on the verge of an injury possibly? We didn't have Stephon Diggs. I mean, maybe the defenses were just going to key in on the run game and try to limit Dalvin Cook. Didn't happen. Dude had 1,900 total yards and 17 total touchdowns, and some weeks was getting more carries than Derrick Henry. The guy balled out.
Yeah, for as much as I love the Vikings offense in 2019, wasn't nearly as bullish on him in 2020, and that one did bite me because Cook and another guy we'll talk about were both my calls this year. With Dalvin Cook, like you said, it's strictly based on, is he going to be able to stay healthy, and are they going to use Alexander Mattison more? Like, that was kind of my thought process, is they're going to want him healthy for what potentially be a playoff run. Use Alexander Mattison a little bit more, but Madison really wasn't as good this year as he was his rookie year, kind of helping in that role. He was really up and down this year, and Cook, when he was healthy and out there, continued to ball out. But I feel like this is a wash because even though this wasn't a great one this year, 2019, we were like, take this guy first round. Like, you need to have Dalvin Cook on your team.
We're 50% on Dalvin Cook here at the moment. And yeah, you hit it on the head with another member that we'll talk about a little bit later, a different position, but there was a big key that played to that guy. So we'll talk about him here in just 1 second. Next up, Miles Sanders. He was one of my must-haves, and he did not turn out to be a must-have. I don't think I want to put it entirely on the shoulders of Miles Sanders. The play calling and the overall offense in Philadelphia pre-Jalen Hurts was horrendous. Mm-hmm. I mean, there would be times where they're not even using Miles Sanders. They didn't involve him in the passing game that much. He did miss 5 games also. That doesn't help things. A lot of people probably took him in the second round as their running back too, maybe third round, and he just never got going. He had a couple games which showed some flashes. Now, the talent is going to be there, and moving forward with Jalen Hurts under center, I don't hate Miles Sanders, and we'll dig deeper into him here this offseason. But as far as 2020 goes, he was a miss.
Yeah, and I mean, everything seemed like it was set up for success. But like you said, I'm not blaming the season on Miles Sanders. I think a lot of fantasy owners might put kind of the blame on him and say, well, he's just not the type of back we thought he was going to be. There was issues at the quarterback position. There was issues with the play calling. There was issues with the offensive line. I mean, there was issues all over the place. They had wide receivers hurt all year long. So I'm not placing the blame on Miles Sanders. It's unfortunate that it didn't end up working out. It's just one of those things where it's like outside factors just didn't allow him to be as successful as we would have liked.
Yep. And speaking of, being a wash, the last guy we're going to talk about here, I got Joe Mixon.
What?
As a wash.
Who's that?
Who's that guy?
Never
heard of him. But here's the deal. Did Joe
So I
Mixon
had my best call at running back and my worst call at running
right.
back.
They canceled each other out. Way to go, Kyle. Here's the thing, though. We really don't know. All we do know is that to start the season, he had like one, maybe 2 games that made you think, all right, cool, here he is. But then he missed 10 games. We never knew if he was coming back. There was always a tease saying, oh, he could be. Never did, never got going. It's a disappointment because we still love the talent of Joe Mixon. What happens with him here, we really don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But Joe Mixon is a great talent that just never got an opportunity or healthy here in 2020.
Yeah, that's the thing. Anybody that comments on the video and says Joe Mixon sucks, I'm sorry, but you don't know what you're talking about. Joe Mixon doesn't suck. He is one of the most talented running backs in the league. This year, though, it was a combination of the offensive line not being nearly as ready as I was hoping for. And then number 2, and I did a video about this on Patreon, teams were not respecting Joe Burrow at the beginning of the season. They were basically trying to cancel out the run. And with as bad as the defense was being, they were just slinging the ball all over the place. Burrow was throwing it like 50
everywhere.
times a game at times. So
Everywhere.
Because of that, it just didn't add up. That win at Jacksonville in week 4, he ran for 151 yards because they were able to feed him the ball consistently and say, hey, go get it. That was his most rushing attempts of the season. So, it's unfortunate it didn't work out. Yes, I had him as high as running back 3 at one point. I think I finally settled on him at running back 4. Absolutely loved him this season. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to have him as a must-have next year, but based on his ADP, you best believe I'm going to be drafting this guy again because I'm ready to get hurt for a second time. I won't be as high as I was this year, but it just didn't work out. But for those of you that did have him, he did end as the running back 11 after week 6. So he was still a top 10 running back a running back 1, given how bad the position was at the time. So,
hey, way to save face there at the end. Great stat to end it out with, Kyle. All right, on to wide receivers. Back to the best calls because we enjoy those ones a lot more. First one, Allen Robinson, Chicago Bears. We love the volume, right? We knew this guy was going to see targets. He had 100 plus catches here once again in 2020. Another super solid year as the main focal point in that offense. Maybe David Montgomery was down the stretch for the last few games, but Allen Robinson saw huge volume once again.
Yeah, Allen Robinson to me, he's like strawberry, vanilla, chocolate ice cream. Like, he's good, right? Like he hits the spot. If you need a little bit of a sweet treat, you don't have anything else around, you have a little bit of ice cream, it's good. Okay. It does what it's supposed to do. It's not sexy. It's not Rocky Road. Okay. It's not something from Cold Stone where you've got 45 different flavors in it and they're chopping it up and everything.
Chunks of brownies and stuff.
Yeah, some brownies. Like, he's not that,
no.
But he's just not a super sexy wide receiver. He just went out there and got the job done. Another season of over 1,000 yards. he's only played with Blake Bortles and Mitch Trubisky his entire career, and the dude balls out. And he's still only 27 years old on top of that. So,
yeah. If this guy could play with a talented top-end quarterback, the numbers could be outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
Outrageous for Allen Robinson. What about DK Metcalf? I was super high on DK. We saw the breakout potential there this past year. Finished top 10, 83 catches, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. He kind of finished a little bit slow, but the entire Seattle Seahawks offense finished a little slow. We saw the big playability. We saw the route tree get a little bit more polished in 2020, and he's going to be and continue to be one of the top targets for Russell Wilson going forward. DK Metcalf is an absolute beast that was a must-have for us here in 2020.
This is a testament to how good he was at the beginning of the season, because you just said it. He finished as a top 10 wide receiver. But from week 10 through week 17, he only had 2 touchdowns and he only had 1 game with more than 100 yards. That's how awesome his first half of the season was. They're letting Russ throw the ball. This is an offense firing on all cylinders. This looked like a legitimate Super Bowl team without the defense at the beginning of the year. And then I have no idea what they decided to do, but it was just like the rest of the way. You just had no idea what you were going to get every week. But that's exactly what DK Metcalf can be. What we saw at the beginning of the year is exactly what he can be. He's another wide receiver 1 for me heading into next season.
Yep, agreed. Now the next guy is another one of these guys that I guess we could lump into your ice cream analogy, because it's Robert Woods, or as we like to call him,
Bobby Trees.
Another reliable season from Robert Woods. I mean, things are changing going forward in LA. We know that, but another 90 catches, 936 yards, 6 touchdowns. Plus, here's a little kicker for Robert Woods. He had 27 points rushing. 27 fantasy points from rushing. I will take that throughout the year. They like to involve him there ever so slightly, but Robert Woods, another great call. A lot of people continue to sleep on Robert Woods. I'm sure they will again in 2021, and he's a rock-solid wide receiver too any given week.
Yeah, no, Robert Woods was expecting really big things. I mean, the one thing that we kind of saw Robert Woods take a step back on was those yards per reception. Some of those bigger plays that he had seen over the last couple of years kind of disappeared. That's why the numbers weren't nearly as gaudy as what they were, or as what they could have been at times. But, how much was that of Jared Goff, not feeling comfortable pushing the ball down the field, whatever it may be. Those touchdowns went back up. That was my biggest concern. And the reason I was telling people is like, hey, if this guy caught 6 touchdowns last year, he would have been an excellent addition to any fantasy team, but he didn't score as much. Went from 2 back to 6. That's where we needed to see a lot of the growth, and it happened.
Yep, agreed. Calvin Ridley, next guy up. He was listed as a breakout in the draft guide and told everybody, do not pass. Do not pass on one Calvin Ridley. Came out, finished top 10, 90 catches, 1,374 yards, 9 touchdowns. Benefited a little bit from Julio being banged up, but we saw him really take this next step forward in this offense in Atlanta, and the guy is a bona fide wide receiver 1. Talent-wise, fantasy football-wise, NFL, whatever you want to say it, the guy is a great wide receiver, and we're starting to see him more and more. Won't be so much of a surprise in 2021, but for the people who spent that earlier pick and kind of reached maybe around, like we told people to do last year, they were very much in love with one Calvin Ridley.
Yep. Targets increased, receptions increased, yards per reception increased, first downs increased. I mean, they were looking towards Calvin Ridley and much more opportune spots. They were making it a priority to get the ball to him every single week. He didn't even have double-digit touchdowns, though. Just imagine if he would have added another 4 to 5 touchdowns. Dude would have had one of the best seasons that we've seen in quite some time at the wide receiver position if we would have added that many more points.
Yeah, the guy was an absolute beast there this past year. Last guy up as a best call for 2020 is none other than DJ Chark of the Jacksonville Jaguars. A lot of people love DJ Chark because of 2019. Kyle came out and said, no, do not love him in 2020. He had 53 catches for 706 yards and 5 touchdowns, played 12 games, and was a huge disappointment for a lot of people.
Yep. And now he did play in 2 less games, so if someone wants to make that argument, I get it. But yards per reception were down a little bit. Touchdowns were down, but I mean, even though it was 2 less games, it was 20 less receptions and it was 300 less yards. So it was a pretty significant drop. And then when you add the touchdowns in on top of that, it's just, now some of it was going back and forth at quarterback but with how bad that defense was and how much they would have to be throwing the ball, it would have been nice to see a little bit more from DJ Chark for those of you. But again, one of the main reasons I was skipping on him is because his 2019 points, it was like 2 or 3 games where over half those points came from. And when you have guys like that, that scares me.
Yeah, because we don't care if you can score 50 in 1 week. If every other week you're going to score 4, we want to find the guys that are scoring 15 plus every single week. That's what we're really trying to find. All right, so those were our best calls for wide receiver. Now on to the worst ones, and you mentioned or referred to this guy earlier. It was Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings, but here's the deal with Thielen, because I wasn't on Thielen either, but we really didn't expect what we got from Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson was so good, and I liked Justin Jefferson, but I was not expecting I wasn't expecting this.
That. No, absolutely not, and it was because of the play of Justin Jefferson that allowed Thielen to continue to be what Thielen has been for years. We just didn't expect that solid option to the level that he was. I mean, Justin Jefferson is basically a solid wide receiver 1 on that team. They couldn't just double cover. They couldn't put a safety over the top on Thielen because they still had to worry about Justin Jefferson. That's what made Thielen still successful.
Yeah. And really, I mean, it was the point. It was the touchdowns this year, 14 touchdowns for Adam Thielen this year. That's what drove his fantasy value. That's the most that he's had in a season. The 25 yards down slightly from the back-to-back 1,000 yards that he had back in 17 and 18. The 74 receptions down a little bit from that as well. So those stats kind of fell in line to kind of what my thought process was, is that he might see some more wide receiver one coverage. There might be some other things at work there too, whether it be throwing the ball to Dalvin Cook more, using the tight ends more, which didn't end up happening. But it was Justin Jefferson that saw a lot more of those targets because he was doing so well. They were forcing the ball his way. So it was those touchdowns that really drove that value. So, if he hadn't scored those touchdowns, if he would have only scored like 8 or 9 touchdowns, but that didn't happen. He scored the 14 touchdowns. I was not expecting him to be that big of a red zone threat, and for Justin Jefferson to absolutely ball out, and by the end of the season being the alpha wide receiver in that offense.
Yep, that helped a lot. Absolutely. A.J. Brown next up as a miss, and this kind of goes hand in hand with what we said for Ryan Tannehill a little bit earlier. It was just their efficiency on the long ball last year, or excuse me, in 2019, was just so efficient that we're like, there's no way really that they can, improve on that or maybe even replicate it. They kind of got better in some areas,
Yep.
which is absolutely crazy because A.J. Brown wasn't 100% healthy throughout the season, still played, had a funny, Instagram live video here at the end of the year with him. I mean, we knew he wasn't healthy, right? But he came out and still played great. 70 catches, just over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, and improved all over the place.
I mean, this is how much better he was, too. He played in 2 less games in 2020, and he saw more targets. He almost 20 more, actually 22 more targets. He saw more receptions. He saw more yards. He saw more touchdowns. So the efficiency, so the yards per reception actually dropped 5 yards. There are not many wide receivers in the NFL where if you said your yards per reception is going to drop by 5 yards, but you're going to have a better season, where you would go, why would I invest in that guy? But it did. There was so much more volume for him this year. And like I said, with Ryan Tannehill, Corey Davis having that legit breakout season and playing so much better this year than he had in years past really allowed A.J. Brown to kind of even take some of that shadow that he would have on him, maybe on that double coverage and things of that nature, back over towards Corey Davis a little bit, which helped him, even though he wasn't going as deep or having some of the big plays, because all of the volume was up. It really led to just a huge season.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kid is an absolute stud. The fact that you can still look back and think that him and DK Metcalf on the same college team, that is crazy.
Congratulations, Shea Patterson. You ruined 2 programs.
Wow.
I don't have any kind of resentment there at all, do I?
Nope, none at all. All right. On to the tight end position, which is an absolute wasteland.
A disaster.
You got what? You got
mess.
3 tight ends, maybe 4, and after that, it's horrible. Like,
trying to think of different words.
I mean, if you don't have Kelsey, you don't have Waller. What do you got? I mean, it was an absolute disaster for a lot of people at the tight end position, and we were not spared either. Now, in the draft guide early on, we had Jonnu Smith as a must-have tight end. He came out, absolutely started to kill it. Me and Kyle started dancing in our chairs, started getting a little cocky, gave him a nickname of Jay Smooth. Dude ended up twisting. Yeah, dude twisted his ankle, got hurt, and ever since that happened, never really regained anything in that offense. Second half of the year, still scored 8+ fantasy points in 8 out of the 14 games that he played. So, I mean, he wasn't horrible for a lot of people. And at the tight end position, hey, you can't really complain too much, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, his receptions and his targets were both up. His yards per reception did drop a little bit. And his touchdowns were up to 8. So, I mean, this is a guy that, was playing well. And in this Tennessee offense, with guys that we just talked about, with an A.J. Brown, with a Corey Davis, he could have been a really solid third option. But like you said, it was that injury that kind of derailed the season, because after he had that injury, that's when you saw a lot more 3 tight ends mixed in. with this team. So to begin the season, it was Jonnu Smith getting snap after snap after snap after snap. He was on the field consistently, but then he gets hurt. Anthony Firkser comes in. He has some games where he helps out. Towards the end of the season, Jeff Swaim was seeing more time on the field. So even though Swaim and Firkser weren't really doing a whole lot, they were still out there for more plays because they were keeping, Jonnu Smith healthy. They were keeping him, a little bit with that workload being down. The snaps didn't necessarily change. The snaps started to go back up a little bit. But by that time at the end of the season, they were, AJ Brown and Corey Davis were on that same page and were really moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And he just never could get it going again. The next guy up is Gronk. And now I have Gronk, and this just goes back to the fact of, hey, it's a wasteland at the tight end position, but I almost nailed Gronk. I went back and I looked, and I said he's going to have right around 50 catches, somewhere between 600 and 700 yards, and be on the verge of 10 touchdowns. He had 45 catches for 623 and 7 touchdowns. So it was close. He ended up finishing as tight end 8 overall in half PPR scoring. Did he absolutely kill it all year long? No, he did not. But at the tight end position, towards the second half of the year, he really maybe helped you out if you were in need, late in the season.
Yeah, and you were exactly right with your analysis here because you said, Kyle, I put him as a bust in the draft guide. So I will say that I actually missed on Rob Gronkowski. I was worried that he wasn't going to be the same and it was going to take him a while to kind of get rolling a little bit. But you said, dude, he could literally fall into the end zone a few times this season and be a tight end 1. And with all the injuries and how it was a wasteland again, that's exactly what ended up happening. Score 7 touchdowns. The numbers kind of right in line with what he did in 2019 as well. So, I'm expecting him back this year. And, I definitely won't list him as a bust this year because we know him and Tommy B like to party a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. They want to party again in 2021. For sure. So on to a bad call that we had, and there's not a whole lot because honestly, tight ends, I guess they could all be bad calls for the most part outside of Kelsey, maybe.
And Waller.
And maybe Waller, yes. Hunter Henry is going to be a bad call here. He just couldn't find the end zone enough, Kyle. He kind of fell into the same Gronk territory, but he just didn't get the touchdowns to kind of push him over. Didn't have a horrible year, 60 catches, 613 yards, only 4 touchdowns. I know to start the year, we thought maybe we'd see a little bit more Tyrod Taylor and have more focus to the tight end. Herbert isn't a bad option. He just, like I said, just couldn't find the end zone.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because a career high 93 targets for Hunter Henry, 60 receptions, also a career high. He just missed out on his career high yards. And then, like you said, only 4 touchdowns. That's really what hurt him. The one thing I will say about Hunter Henry, though, and this is the biggest stat, 14 games, he didn't miss a game due to injury. He missed 2 games due to COVID. Mm-hmm. So he didn't get hurt this year either. He was healthy all season long, which has really been kind of the issue with him. Played 15 games in 2016, but then only 14 games, tore his ACL and missed, only 12 games last year, COVID for 2 games this year. So him being healthy, 93 targets, I'm really hoping he stays there in LA. Didn't finish nearly as high as I would have liked. Dude scores 4 more touchdowns, and he's a top 5 tight end more than likely this season. But just wasn't in the cards. Hopefully he stays there in LA because I really want to see that relationship between him and Justin Herbert grow.
Yep, agreed. Now, that's all the best and worst calls. We do have a couple guys, but we're kind of going to just consider a wash at this point. I know if you watched it last offseason, I made a do not draft Amari Cooper video. Kyle made a must-have Amari Cooper video. We've never agreed on Amari Cooper. We will probably never agree on Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper basically performed at his ADP. So he didn't do any better. He didn't do any worse.
Right
so
there.
He was right in the middle. So neither one of us was really right or wrong. Didn't have a bad year. Didn't kill it. I mean, the injury to Dak Prescott, I'm sure, played a part in that, though. So he's basically going to be a wash. Also, I'm throwing Aaron Jones in the wash mix. I didn't want any part of Aaron Jones, really, because of the inflated ADP. This dude scored almost 90 fantasy points in just 3 games this year. If you take out those big games, he was not that great down the stretch. Missed a couple games, had a few games in single digits, even in PPR scoring formats. So he really wasn't utilized as much second half of the season. That really hurt a lot of people. So Aaron Jones is going to be a wash also. Because, hey, 43 points in week 2. After that, it was downhill sledding. So that week 2 performance really carried him for quite a long time.
There it is.
Perfect.
2020
Kyle,
in a nutshell.
2020 in a nutshell. That's right. We did like a couple hundred videos, and we just, basically gave you the the Cliff Notes version in the last 39 minutes.
But Jake, remember in like August when we started doing videos every day and people were responding to us saying, well, I don't know why you're doing videos because football isn't happening. It happened, people. Full season in the books.
That's right. There's a lot of people out there saying it'll never work.
We told y'all to stay positive.
Told y'all. That maybe be one of our better calls of the year right there,
yes.
Kyle. We told people from the beginning of the year that it was going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It happened.
Keep the faith. Stay positive.
That's right.
Think happy thoughts. It was a difficult year all around. Still is for the most part. Still is a lot of stuff going on around us. But I can't imagine that we're not going to have a better 2021 at this point. So yes, I agree. Our best call of the season was telling everyone to stay positive. We are going to get football this year, and we got it.
Absolutely. And we enjoyed it a lot. We enjoyed having you along with us. We got to break a milestone. We went into the 100K club, currently at 113,000. But listen, real talk for a second. I'm not happy with 113,000 people. That number needs to be higher. Where's it at? Right here. That number,
that ladder, baby.
That number needs to start with a 2 by the end of 2021. And if you can help us out by hitting that subscribe button, both me and Kyle will greatly appreciate it. Listen, it's the off-season time. We got drafts coming right up around the corner. Mock drafts coming up for the NFL draft. It's going to be a lot of information, a lot of videos coming your way. So if you're looking for all things NFL, we will have you covered. Plus, Kyle, there's some surprises coming. There's some big news coming here in the next couple weeks. So make sure you stay tuned. Me or Kyle will share it with you. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Do us a favor. Hit the like button while you're here to help us share this video as much as we possibly can, because we'd like to be transparent. We will always be that way here on this channel. But for myself and Kyle, hopefully you guys enjoyed our best and worst calls of 2020 and start making a list, because we'll do it again next year, Kyle. We'll see how many we can get right and how many we get wrong this year. It's a lot of fun to do, though. We look forward to it. So hopefully you guys had a great week this week, and we will talk to you later.